The Greyhound bus shuddered to a stop. Jake Malone stepped off, his breath a white cloud in the frigid Minnesota air. He pulled his worn army jacket tighter, a futile attempt to ward off the biting wind. Returning to his hometown after a decade, he had hoped for peace. What he found was an unsettling silence, a stillness that felt heavier than the snow piled high on the sidewalks. He walked past dimly lit shops, their windows frosted over, obscuring whatever wares lay within. Faces, mostly unfamiliar, glanced at him with a mixture of curiosity and indifference. A decade in the furnace of Iraq had changed him, etched lines on his face, replaced his youthful optimism with a weariness that settled deep in his bones. The war had followed him home, whispering in his nightmares, haunting the edges of his vision. All he craved now was solitude, a chance to outrun the ghosts of his past. He found a room at the Pinewood Motel, a faded green building at the edge of town. The owner, a woman with tired eyes and a cigarette permanently affixed to her lip, barely looked up as he signed the register. The room was small, smelling faintly of damp wood and disinfectant. He dropped his duffel bag on the worn carpet, the sound a dull thud in the stillness. As he looked out the window at the snow-covered landscape, a shiver ran down his spine. This wasn't peace, it was something else entirely, something cold and unforgiving, just like the winter that had settled over this town. The days that followed were a blur of gray skies and biting wind. Jake spent his time wandering the snow-covered streets, a solitary figure in a town that seemed to hold its breath. He visited his parents' graves, the headstones stark against the white expanse of the cemetery. He stood there for a long time, the wind whistling through the bare branches of the nearby oak trees, carrying with it whispers of his past. He found himself drawn to the local bar, a dimly lit establishment called The Last Chance. It was a haven for the town's lost souls, a place where sorrows were drowned in cheap whiskey and forgotten promises. He recognized a few faces from his youth, but they seemed like strangers now, separated by a gulf of shared history and unspoken pain. He kept to himself, nursing a beer at the end of the bar, his eyes fixed on the flickering neon sign outside.
Jake Malone, is that really you?
He turned to face the speaker, a tall man with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of secrets. Recognition flickered in Jake's eyes. It was Sheriff Tom Harris, a friend of his father's. The sheriff pulled up a chair, his gaze lingering on Jake's face.
You've seen your share of hardship, son. But some things you can't outrun, no matter how far you go.
His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Before Jake could probe further, the sheriff drained his glass and stood up.
Just remember, Jake, this town has a way of pulling you back in.
The news spread through the town like wildfire on a dry prairie. Robert Harris, the owner of the local lumber mill and one of the town's most prominent citizens, was found dead in his office above the bank. The circumstances were suspicious. The sheriff, his face grim, declared it a murder. The town, usually so quiet one could hear the snow falling, erupted in a frenzy of speculation and fear. Jake, despite his desire to remain detached, found himself drawn into the unfolding drama. He stood among the crowd gathered outside the bank, watching as the coroner's van pulled away. The faces around him were a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. He felt a familiar unease creeping up his spine, a primal instinct honed on the battlefields of a distant land. This was not the peaceful haven he had imagined. Later that day, he found himself at the Last Chance, the air thick with whispers about the murder. Some whispered about a shady business deal gone wrong, others about a jealous lover. The sheriff, nursing a drink at his usual corner table, caught Jake's eye across the room. He beckoned him over, his face etched with concern.
This town, it's got secrets, Jake. Dark secrets buried deep. He took a long swallow of his drink, his eyes meeting Jake's. And sometimes those secrets have a way of coming back to haunt us.
Section 4. The Reluctant Detective. The sheriff, despite his gruff exterior, saw something in Jake. Maybe it was the haunted look in his eyes, the way he carried himself like a man who had seen too much.
I started sharing details of the case with Jake, hoping to pick his brain, to tap into the instincts that had kept him alive in a war zone.
Jake, though reluctant to get involved, found himself drawn in, the puzzle of the murder stirring something within him. He started by visiting the scene of the crime, the lumber mill looming over the town like a watchful giant. The air was thick with the scent of pine and something else, something metallic and unsettling.
He questioned the mill workers, their faces etched with a mixture of grief and fear. He learned about Robert Harris, the town's benefactor, who was not as beloved as his public persona suggested.
He discovered whispers of shady deals, of disgruntled employees, of a past shrouded in secrecy. He found himself revisiting the places he knew from his youth, now seeing them through a different lens, noticing the cracks beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic town. As he delved deeper, he felt a growing sense of unease. The pieces of the puzzle didn't quite fit. There was something else at play here, something darker and more sinister than he had initially imagined. And as he followed the trail of clues, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that he was getting too close to something dangerous. In the heart of winter, the town was blanketed in a thick layer of snow, hiding secrets beneath its pristine surface. Marta Rodriguez, the local business owner, had always kept to herself, but now, she found herself in the spotlight.
I knew more than I let on, but revealing too much could be dangerous. The town had its secrets, and some were better left buried.
Emily Thompson, a young journalist, was determined to uncover the truth. She had a knack for digging up stories that others wanted to keep hidden.
I could feel it in my gut. There was something big here, something that could blow the lid off this sleepy little town. But I had to be careful. People were watching, and not everyone wanted the truth to come out.
As Marta and Emily's paths crossed, they realized they had to work together, combining their knowledge and resources to get to the bottom of the mystery. The snow-covered town held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. With each step closer to the truth, Jake realized that redemption came at a cost. His journey had led him to confront not only the town's dark secrets, but his own demons as well.
Jake, you don't have to do this alone. We're in this together, remember?
Dr. Samuel Green, Jake's therapist, had been a steady presence, guiding him through the turmoil of his mind.
Jake, facing your past is never easy, but it's the only way to move forward. You've come so far, don't give up now.
As Jake pieced together the final clues, he understood that the path to redemption was fraught with peril. But with the support of his loved ones, he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The price of redemption was high, but for Jake, it was a price worth paying.